Two attempted killings on opposite sides of the globe convulse the politics of those places and of the world. It's a special episode of Unholy. I'm Jonathan Friedland of The Guardian in London.
And I'm Yonit Levy of Channel 12 in Tel Aviv. Unholy, two Jews on the news. You said two attempted killings, 14 hours, and a world of difference between them, we should say, right? One is a country trying to prevent more terror and taking down the mastermind and the architect, one of the architects of the October 7th massacre. The other is a clear attack on democracy and on a democratically elected nominee of a party. We don't yet 100% know the outcome of the former. We do know the outcome of the latter, but definitely very dramatic. 14 hours here in the Middle East and obviously in the United States as well.
So we're obviously going to come on to, and we should get into the implications of what looks like an assassination attempt in Pennsylvania against Donald Trump, the former president of the United States, a shooter aiming at him. It seems, again, some dispute about what exactly hit the blooded ear of Donald Trump as he appeared at a rally at a podium. Some reports, he himself saying it was a bullet. Others talking about glass, perhaps from the teleprompter, we don't know, leading to this very iconic, instantly iconic image of Donald Trump, fist raised in the air in defiance, appearing to mouth to the camera, fight, fight. But the photograph that will endure is him with that raised fist and the American flag behind. But the event that was earlier we'll come on to all the implications of that. But let's just talk about the one that came first. Who was the target of this Israeli operation and what exactly the fallout was, because a lot of the reporting outside Israel has focused on those who were killed in the course of that attempt to kill this man. And the estimate, again, sourced to the health ministry of Gaza, which we know is Hamas controlled, but saying some 90 people, many civilians, were killed in the attempt. But just fill us in on who this was and what we know about whether this attempt was, as it were, successful.
So Mohammed Deif has been on Israel's most wanted list for about 30 years. As we said, one of the masterminds of the October 7th attack with Yahya Sinwar. But even before that, the blood of hundreds of Israelis on his hands, the leader of the Zardil al-Qassam brigades, and the only senior official of Hamas's military wing that has been active since the early days of Hamas. And now, again, Israel is saying that it thinks it succeeded in finally catching up with him. But there have been 7 assassination attempts, at least against this man, we should say in the 90s, involved in the wave of suicide bombings against Israelis, mainly on buses, then again in the Second Intifada. And parallel to this, Israel trying to catch up with him. We remember famous pictures, 2002, 2006, every time hitting the place where he was at. He is wounded, even severely, but never dying from these attempts at targeted killings. We should say that Israel was quite surprised to know that he is in a better state than it thought during this aftermath of October 7th. And yesterday, another attempt that Israel believes this time was successful. This man is really the epitome of evil. And it was pretty clear that Israel was looking for him and looking for Yahya Sinwar. It's also clear that because of his health issues, he couldn't have stayed underground for too long. So that is what happened yesterday in the rubble. There is still not a clear picture of what exactly happened. You mentioned this, and of course the world is focusing on the innocent lives lost. In the same case of Operation Arnon, where Israel succeeded in rescuing 4 hostages alive, there's much less discussion of the fact that Hamas hid these hostages amongst civilians, or that this arch-terrorist hid among civilians. That is something less reported on. More reported on is the fact that there are dozens who, again, according to Hamas officials in the Gaza Strip, lost their lives after this targeted assassination.
So you've said how he would stay in different places. He was a constantly moving target. I think his nickname was the guest, because he would always stay, apparently sleeping in a different bed every night so that he would elude those who were targeting him. And he inevitably invests a figure like this with some kind of mystique among his own people, that he is constantly able to evade death, a sort of Rasputin-like figure who, no matter how many times people try and kill him, he somehow lives to tell the tale. I am struck by the fact that yet again, there is not a conclusive word on him. And you would just think, given the history, that it is at least possible that he has got away with it one more time. Two questions that come to my mind. If he has been killed, do we think, that Hamas would ever say that? Or would they keep the mystery alive? Or would they actually say, he's been killed and almost have a sort of an event around it where, you couldn't do a big funeral, but you know what I mean, where it becomes a focus among their support base in Gaza, that they want to give him a sort of martyr's send-off as they would see it. So would Hamas confirm if he is dead, if he were? That's one question in my mind. And then the other one that's in my mind is, let's say it is confirmed, and this is not an original thought, I've heard people speculating about this. Would it be the case that this would give the ladder through which Benjamin Netanyahu could climb down from the tree of this war? In other words, could he say, we've done this, he's the architect, the mastermind of October 7th, therefore we can declare victory and end this stage, at least, of this conflict? Or does it have to be Sinwar himself? Who has the totemic, symbolic meaning in this thing? So a whole lot I'm putting in your lap.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, Israelis, there are two questions that they had yesterday when the news of this came out. One is he really truly dead? And the second was, how does this affect the hostage deal, or the hostage deal negotiations, rather? So first of all, that's a very good question to ask vis-a-vis Mohammed Deif. Is he really dead? As we speak now, on a Sunday afternoon, the Shin Bet Israeli intelligence services do say that the other senior person who was targeted, Rafa Salama, was indeed killed. They know that for sure, but notice that the official notice does not say that Mohammed Deif has been killed. There's another thing that I found interesting today. The response from Hamas is tepid, right? First of all, they said he's alive. That's the first thing they said. But the second is that there's no, what you would assume would be a barrage of rockets over Israel if indeed he did die. So there is not 100% a way of knowing at this point. I think it will probably take a couple of days to verify it, but we have seen in other cases of these top officials, no one as senior as Mohammed Deif, that eventually it took a few days, but Israel could get that information, whether that person was dead or not. Now, the other question that we mentioned, what the effect this has. Remember, we said that this finally was a moment where the negotiations could move forward. So the first thing to say is that Hamas put this on hold. But it is what Israel considers is because Deif and Yahya Sinwar were the most sort of hawkish on the hostage deal and didn't want to go to a deal, maybe this will convince at least Sinwar. To your question, Jonathan, about whether the war can be over, if you listen to what Netanyahu, who yesterday, after a very long time, called for a press conference, say, for him, the war is continuing and Israel still considers Sinwar the number one target.
Yeah, and as we've been saying so often, it's not as if, for political reasons, Benjamin Netanyahu is in a great hurry to declare this war over. In a way, my question rested on the premise that he would want to find a way of saying that the war is over. And if he did want to, this would be as good a moment as any. But I think for all the reasons we've unpacked over the last weeks and months, he's not in that place. Just perhaps one last thing on this, relating to your point about the death toll, the 90 estimated killed. The place where that happened was in an area where Gazans had been directed to go. If they were displaced, they were told that this was a place of safety. In terms of the argument that rages now, that cuts both ways, of course, because people who are very damning of Israel would say, how could you possibly use, live fire in an area where people have fled as a place of safety? People on the other side of the argument would say, how terrible of Mohammed Deif, knowing that he has a target on his back, to hide in a place where innocent people have been moved and directed and think is a place of safety.
And
so the argument cuts both ways.
But the cynicism of where he is hiding, right, exactly in the place where he knows that Israel's not supposed to target because of civilians.
Because he would think that makes him less vulnerable because of all the obvious inhibitions on action. But in a way, Israel, by its action, signaling to him and to Sinwar and others, that is not going to inhibit our action. If you choose to be there, we will come after you, and even if that means scores of people losing their lives. But obviously we're going to watch and wait to see if anybody does confirm that this attempt was ended in a death. Meanwhile, in Pennsylvania, mercifully, one person was killed, but not the target of the assassination, Donald Trump himself, who instantly was able to signal that he was alive with that sort of fist-pumping gesture, statements that he's put out afterwards, and then being seen, walking unaided down the steps of his aeroplane when he went back home. Myriad questions now, among them, how did the Secret Service allow someone with a rifle to get on a roof of a nearby building within, it seems, a clear line of sight of the former president? Just people who were there pointed him out, by all accounts, by one account anyway, of someone who did that, speaking to the BBC. That's one question. And then, obviously, just what the impact will be on a country that has known political violence. I've been speaking with people, veterans of American politics, who start ticking off the events that they have witnessed in their own lifetime, the ones who have been around longest, remembering the assassination of John F. Kennedy, the assassination of Bobby Kennedy, the assassination of Martin Luther King, the attempted assassination of Ronald Reagan, and so on. This is a country where political violence is never far away. This election year was already bitterly polarized and divided. The threat of violence, clearly present since January the 6th, 2021, and this has taken it to another level.
Yes. First of all, as you said, we're all very glad that it ended the way it did. I am struck by the power of the image, right? And his understanding, former President Trump understanding of it, right? That image of his clenched fist and his blood-stained face surrounded by security guards, in the background, the American flag, already a very iconic picture. And this is the exact representation of Trumpism, right? It's saying, I beat the odds. I am the underdog. I'm the survival. I rebel against the system. If you're a conspiracy theorist, you believe that the deep state tried to eliminate Trump and he won against all odds. All of that in that one iconic picture, and that understanding that he has of the medium, of the media, to understand that in that moment, which is a very scary moment for a person, right? It doesn't matter if you're a president or not, or you were a president. It's a really frightening moment to stand up and do that, clinch fist moment. We tend to say that a picture is worth 1,000 words. I don't want to sound glib, but it does seem like a picture is worth 1,000 votes or more, because that is exactly the power, right, that he wanted to show of how strong he is, of how strong a president can be. We talked a lot about the debate and Biden's performance. And I'm sure that for more than 2 weeks, the Biden people wanted the conversation to change and to shift and to move to Trump. They just didn't want it to happen in this way. You mentioned the political violence being part of the United States definitely since 2016, but even before that. We like to talk a lot, and we're both history buffs, which is a nice way of saying history nerds. We like to talk a lot about assassinations that succeeded and what they did throughout history, Julius Caesar and Franz Ferdinand, beginning World War I. And of course, for Israelis, the tragedy of Yitzhak Rabin and the derailment of the Israel story since. Assassinations that don't succeed also have an impact on history. And this definitely will. This night will. If I can pull us back just from the Israeli perspective, if I may, I will say that the Israeli government dedicated 2 hours of its weekly cabinet meeting to discuss the incitement against the prime minister. The prime minister is saying the incitement against me is a danger to me. It's a danger to the family, to my family. It's a danger to democracy. Everyone in that room, not everyone, but many of the ministers comparing the protests against Netanyahu after October 7th to this sort of hatred against Trump and what it can lead to. On the other side, Netanyahu's opponents saying the only people who have been hurt in the streets so far have been the protesters themselves by the police. And Netanyahu himself, again, this is what his opponents are saying, is not the victim of incitement. He is the engine of incitement. So again, this is a very, very volatile environment. It's very clear. And this is the discussion that is happening in Israel today after this assassination attempt.
The immediate hours after this event happened, there were a lot of people who felt it's too soon to talk about the politics of this or to make it political. Donald Trump's son, Eric Trump, posted that now an instantly iconic image that you've been talking about, with the message on social media, "This is the fighter America needs." In other words, he immediately went to the political capital of this event. That, I think, means that it's legitimate for other people to talk about the politics because they've made it political straight away. several of them, Republicans, have been making this point that about incitement. So J.D. Vance, who some people say could be announced even this week as Donald Trump's running mate, there's a whole contest going on for that place. He said the central premise of the Biden campaign is that President Donald Trump is an authoritarian fascist who must be stopped at all cost. That rhetoric led directly to President Trump's attempted assassination. So their project is to take this event and say, if you now criticize Donald Trump as a threat to democracy, you are engaged in incitement to violence. So the taboo on making political hay out of this lasted a few hours at most. What I think perhaps few people anticipated is that some of the people seeking political advantage in this would be thousands of miles away in Israel. I mean, the notion of how quick and how opportunistically those supporters of the Israeli prime minister to jump in and go, well, this is actually about us. And now critics of Netanyahu, you will be in effect on the same side as the would-be assassin in Pennsylvania. It's quite something, given that, immediately you saw Democrats and others just say how they were hoping and praying for Donald Trump's survival, and yet other people immediately making great political advantage of it. On the point of the iconic image, I once spoke to someone who said the thing you've got to understand about Donald Trump is he was okay as a businessman, in some ways not so great, probably, on balance, might have lost as much money as he made over the years. That was really not his forte. Where he really had a particular skill was, first of all, in sort of branding, but also when he was on the show The Apprentice, he's basically a TV producer. Someone with a good close-up eye view told me that about Trump. And you think about the way he's punctuated his career, that moment when he, during the Black Lives Matter process, and he goes down to a church with a copy of a volume of the Bible in his hand. He thinks in images, and he thinks in images that will go viral. He thinks in images that will go around the world. But as you said, how extraordinary that his instinct kicked in the moment of mortal peril. He thinks, how will this look on TV? That's the thought that goes through his mind. He's always aware there is a camera on him. How will this play? And the overarching theme of this election is strength versus weakness. Biden's troubles and perceived weakness have dominated the news for more than 2 weeks. Now he has offered up this image of extraordinary strength because he's a man who's just been shot. He's got the strength to sort of, raise his fist aloft. So he knows what he's doing. He's got this kind of reptilian intellect, meaning he thinks instinctively like an animal, and he thinks in pictures, and he's now got one for the ages.
Yes, and just apart from all that, it is frightening, right? That this is the place where the deep divides and the hatred and the delegitimization and just the rift between two parts of the society have arrived at. And the sort of fumes were in the air, and the sense of violence was in the air probably since 2016. But this is where we have arrived at. And it is a frightening moment. I think whatever your thoughts are or beliefs are, whatever your political views are, it's a frightening moment when this is where we have arrived at.
Yes. That said, somebody I thought noted cautiously that, when Ronald Reagan was the victim of an attempted assassination and people were ready to say this is a sign of polarization and political heat, yes, the motive of the shooter was he wanted to impress Jodie Foster, right, in 1981. We don't know what the motive of this guy was. On the one hand, registered Republican. On the other hand, he made a donation to a progressive network, in 2021, a $15 donation. It could be that this was one person who had his own psychological drivers for this terrible act. We don't know that yet, but that there is great political polarization, bitterness, and division in today's America is absolutely beyond doubt.
Yes, and the irony that we should point out, right, this is a president who thinks the gun laws shouldn't be strict in the United States. Maybe that is something else to say as well today. And anyone looking for a conspiracy theory can turn to a book written by one Jonathan Friedland in 2016, I believe, about an assassination attempt like this against a president very similar to Trump. It's called To Kill a President. under the pseudonym Sam Bourne. I'm not trying to sell books for you. Just I was reminded. It was the second thought I had this morning when I saw the news. So I had to mention that as well.
Well, no, I'm grateful that you mentioned that. And the story there, to kill the president. The circumstances are a little bit uncanny, actually, if people go back to that book. But, that will be something for another day. Right now, we're thinking about something all too real, those events in Pennsylvania. So we will obviously be keeping a close eye, like everyone else in the world, on these developments. In the United States, and wait for word on the outcome of those events in Gaza. It's been a very dramatic weekend. And Unholy will be back, as always, on Friday with bringing you all up to date with all of that and anything else, unless, of course, something else happens, which will bring you and me back together even sooner.
Yeah, let's hope for some quiet days, shall we? And Sarah, thank yous to Omer Primat, Gaia Glaser, and Omri Barak. And a new episode on Friday.